I thought I had buried it all. The gunfire, the sandstorms, the smell of blood soaked into dry soil, the sound of men crying for their mothers before slipping into silence. That was another life. For the last 8 years, I had built a quiet world in the outskirts of Colorado Springs, a modest cabin in the woods, a dog named Cooper, a routine I didn't have to question. Wake up at 6, coffee black, 2 eggs, 1 toast, morning walk, afternoon chores, whiskey at sunset. No more orders, no more enemies, no more watching my 6. Every time I stepped out the door, and I was fine with that until the day I saw his face. It was early spring, and the local hardware store was unusually crowded. I had gone in for a replacement part for my wood splitter. As I stood in line, flipping through a rack of keychains at the counter, I heard a voice behind me. Not the words, the accent. My spine stiffened. I turned slowly, and there he was. Older, thicker beard, civilian clothes, but unmistakable. Qadir Rahimi. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade, but I would never forget the man who orchestrated the IED that killed 4 of my brothers and nearly took my leg. I stared at him too long. He looked up and caught my eyes. Something passed between us, like static, recognition, a flicker. Then he turned and walked out, as casually as if we were strangers. I stood there, frozen, keychain in hand. There's a moment, a very specific kind of moment, when you realize your past isn't in the past at all. It's just been waiting for you to let your guard down. And I had let it down too far, for too long. I didn't sleep that night. The face, the voice, the history, it all rushed back like a flood through a cracked dam. I pulled out the old footlocker from beneath my bed, the one I swore I'd never open again. Inside, everything was exactly as I left it. My desert camis, my deployment journal, a photo of the 5 of us, me, Daniels, Holt, Ramirez, and C.H. Joe smiling in front of a Humvee just days before it blew. And at the bottom, wrapped in an old towel, my Sig Sauer P226. Still clean, still ready. I didn't call anyone. Not my old unit buddies. Not the VA, not even the sheriff I sometimes had beers with on weekends, because I knew they'd either try to stop me, or worse, they'd tell me to forget it, but I couldn't forget it. Qadir wasn't just a ghost from the war. He was a butcher. And if he was here in my town, something was wrong. He wasn't the kind of man who retires into quiet suburbia. No, Qadir Rahimi only moved with purpose, which meant he wasn't alone. He was planning something. The next day I followed him. It wasn't hard. He wasn't exactly subtle. He drove a black SUV with temporary plates and tinted windows, the kind of vehicle you use when you don't want people to see what's inside. He went to a warehouse on the edge of town, near the old train yard. I watched from across the street, through binoculars. Men came and went. None of them looked local. A few were clearly military trained. Movements too clean. Weapons held too tight. This wasn't some small-time drug ring. This was paramilitary. Foreign. Organized. I needed proof. I needed a way in, and I knew exactly who to call. Her name was Lena. We met during my 3rd tour, when she was working intel with the NATO Joint Task Force. Sharp, fast, and fearless. The kind of woman who read enemy formations the way most people read newspapers. We lost touch after Kabul fell, but I had her number tucked away, just in case. She picked up after 2 rings. Jack, that's me. Jesus, I thought you died. I'm working on it. Listen, I need your help. A pause. Then the sound. By rustling papers talk. I gave her the name, the description, the location. She went quiet for a long while. You're sure it's him? I never forget the face of a man who kills my team. All right, she said. Give me 48 hours. Those 48 hours felt longer than any deployment I'd ever served. I barely slept. My dog Cooper paced the cabin like he sensed my nerves. I cleaned the gun, twice. I drove past the warehouse every day, watching them unload crates. Some were marked with Cyrillic writing. One had a faint radiation symbol barely visible under spray paint. I didn't know what they were planning, but I knew one thing for sure. If Qadir was back, then war had followed him. And this time it was on my soil. On the 2nd night, Lena called. You were right, she said. It's him. Qadir slipped through a CIA rendition in 2018. They thought he was dead. He wasn't. He's been working with a new cell operating out of Eastern Europe. What are they doing in Colorado? They're testing routes, smuggling materials, possibly weapons-grade uranium. My blood ran cold. You're telling me they're planning a domestic attack? That's the working theory. And now that you've seen him, you're in it, Jack, whether you like it or not. I looked out the window. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. My cabin, my sanctuary, now felt like a bullseye. What do you want me to do? I asked. Lena's voice was steady. Whatever it takes. Jack Murdoch hadn't slept well in years. Nightmares from Fallujah, Kandahar, and the chaos of Helmand still clawed their way into his dreams. But this night, the demons weren't from the past, they were from the present. He'd seen something, someone, a face he thought was buried along with the years he'd tried to forget. It started with a sound. Not gunfire, not screams, just a cough. A specific kind of wet, harsh cough that reminded him of sandstorm nights and diesel fumes. He turned his head in the alley, expecting another vagrant or junkie. What he saw instead chilled him deeper than any battlefield. Yuri Kozlov, the Russian ghost. A name whispered in black operations, suspected dead after an IE obliterated a convoy in northern Afghanistan. Jack had seen the reports. Hell, he'd read the classified file himself back when he still had clearance. But that face, those dead eyes, he could never mistake them. Jack didn't follow him that night. He stood frozen, heart hammering like it had on his first mission back in '85. He waited until Kozlov turned the corner and disappeared into the city's shadows. Then Jack leaned against the brick wall, hands trembling. His past had come back, and it wore the face of a killer. The next morning, Jack visited an old contact. Tyrone Shade Hawkins had been CIA back in the day, now working private security, meaning mercenary. He ran surveillance out of a boxing gym in the Bronx, teaching local kids how to throw punches while watching the city through a web of cameras. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Shade said, tossing a towel over his shoulder. Jack didn't smile. I saw Kozlov. Shade's expression went cold. "That's impossible. I thought so too." Shade didn't question him again. He trusted Jack's instincts like he trusted his own trigger finger. They spent the next 4 hours digging. Surveillance tapes, facial recognition, movement patterns in the Eastern Bloc communities around Queens. By day 3 they found him. Kozlov was operating under a new identity. Dmitry Slonov, on paper a low-level construction logistics manager, for a shell company that had no real clients and no real purpose. But it didn't take long to uncover the truth. Human trafficking, weapons, drugs, and something worse, children. Jack sat in the dark of Shade's surveillance room, eyes fixed on Kozlov's face as he entered a warehouse in Greenpoint. Kids, no older than 10, were herded inside like cattle. "This isn't just about ghosts anymore," Shade muttered. Jack stood. "It's about redemption." The fire that had lain dormant in his chest since retirement ignited, not out of rage, not even revenge, something deeper, a refusal to let the evil he once fought thrive in his own backyard. That night, Jack returned to the one place he'd sworn never to revisit, the LOCKBOX. It was a private arsenal hidden under his home in Newark, locked behind biometric gates and steel. Guns, tactical gear, encrypted comms relics from a life he no longer claimed. He opened the trunk containing his old fatigues, now faded but still reeking of war. He ran his hand over the patch. 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. "I'm not doing this for me," he whispered to the silence. "I'm doing this because no one else will." 2 nights later, the hunt began. Kozlov's warehouse had a rotating security crew, ex-military, heavily armed, no uniforms. Jack studied their shift patterns, blind spots, and camera loops. It was methodical, surgical. But this time he wasn't part of a team, he was alone, and he preferred it that way. The breach was quiet. Jack moved like smoke, slipping through shadows and disabling guards without a single gunshot. He made it to the holding cell steel cages, children huddled in corners. He opened each one, whispering gently, guiding them to the stairwell where a hidden exit awaited. His movements were precise, heart steady, until the last room. There, waiting for him, was Kozlov. "You should have stayed dead," Kozlov said in his thick Russian accent, pistol drawn. Jack stared into the same eyes he remembered from Kandahar. "You first." They moved at the same time. Kozlov fired. Jack ducked and rolled, returning fire. The 2 men danced between steel and concrete, old warriors reliving a death match that fate had delayed. The gunfire drew the rest of the guards. Jack knew he couldn't win this fight head-on. He threw a flashbang, grabbed a steel rod, and swung hard into Kozlov's ribs. The Russian staggered, but didn't fall. "Still slow, old man," Kozlov grinned. Jack smirked. "But I hit harder now." He tackled him through a steel door, both men crashing into crates below. Kozlov reached for a blade. Jack was faster. He drove an elbow into the Russian's throat, disarming him, then delivered the final blow, sharp, swift, and brutal. Kozlov collapsed. Jack didn't stay to watch him die. He activated the fire protocol. Alarms rang out. Sprinklers erupted as flames spread. Jack led the last child through the back exit. He looked back only once, seeing the warehouse engulfed in smoke. By dawn, it was all over. The news blamed an electrical fire. The authorities never mentioned the cages or the traffickers. But whispers moved through the underworld. Someone had returned, someone who wasn't afraid to fight dirty. Back at Shade's gym, Jack sat in silence, bruised and bloodied. "Is it over?" Shade asked. Jack didn't answer immediately. He looked at the kids, now safe, sleeping in the back room. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." Because Kozlov wasn't alone. Files recovered from the warehouse revealed names, locations, networks, faces. Jack remembered from places like Tora Bora and the Korangal Valley. Men who'd vanished into smoke, now building empires in the ruins of urban America. The war had come home. And Jack Murdoch, the man who thought he'd buried the soldier inside him, was once again sharpening the blade. This time, he wasn't fighting for a flag, he was fighting for the future. Jack stood in the middle of the old warehouse, breathing heavy, heart pounding, the dull metallic scent of blood in the air. Under the flickering lights, 2 gang members lay unconscious, maybe worse, on the concrete floor. He didn't plan for it to go this far, but the ambush left him with no choice. These weren't just street thugs, they were soldiers from a past he thought he'd buried overseas, but now they were here, in New York, and they were hunting him. Earlier that morning, Jack had taken the subway to Brooklyn, following a thin trail of rumors and whispers. Someone in the area had been distributing military-grade weapons to local gangs. When he checked the serial numbers scratched on a discarded AR-15 clip, his breath caught in his throat. It was a NATO-issued lot, one he'd seen years ago in Kandahar. These weapons weren't stolen from a U.S. armory. They were recovered from a battlefield, the same battlefield where Jack lost half his unit. As Jack walked through the streets, memories surged in waves. The laughter of his men, the night raids, the dust and blood, and that one mission, Operation Gulnet, where they were double-crossed by an informant, leaving his team slaughtered. Only Jack and one other soldier made it out. That soldier's name, Marcus Wynn. The thought made his jaw tighten. Marcus had disappeared after they came home. No funeral, no obituary, just silence. Jack assumed he was dead, but now, seeing the weapons and the tactics used by the gang-flanking maneuvers, encrypted radio calls, even hand signals straight from the Marines' handbook, it was clear. Someone was bringing military operations to the streets, and Jack was their target. Back at his apartment, Jack unfolded a black duffel bag he hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside were worn combat boots, a collapsible baton, old photos, and a thick, leather-bound notebook. Tucked between the pages was a faded photo of his squad-weld men smiling under a burning desert sun. He traced his finger across their faces. 8 were dead. 3 were unaccounted for. 1 was him. Jack made a call. Not to the police. They wouldn't understand. He dialed a number he hadn't used since retirement. "Yeah," a voice answered Lance. "It's Murdoch." A pause, then a low chuckle. "You're alive. I'll be damned. I need eyes on Marcus Wynn. I think he's back. And I think he's running something in Brooklyn." "You serious?" "Dead serious." Another pause, then. "All right. Give me 48 hours. Click. Jack stared out his window at the city, the lights below flickering like embers from a war zone. He wasn't just dealing with criminals, he was dealing with trained killers, his kind. And Marcus Wynn, if he was indeed alive, was more dangerous now than ever before. 2 days later, Jack received a burner phone in the mail with a single video on it. He watched as Marcus, now bearded and built like a tank, walked into a dark room flanked by gang members. He gave orders like a general, cold, calculated, ruthless, and then he said something that made Jack's blood run cold. "Find Jack Murdoch, and bring me his head." This wasn't just about weapons or turf wars. This was personal. Jack knew Marcus blamed him for what happened in Kandahar, but the truth was more complicated. That informant who sold them out, Jack had let him go once, gave him the benefit of the doubt. That mistake cost lives. Marcus never forgave him. That night, Jack moved to an abandoned fire station in the Bronx's new base of operations. He reinforced the doors, set up surveillance, and started building a map of Marcus's network. It stretched wider than he feared. Dirty cops, former military, ex-mercenaries. This wasn't a gang. It was a private army. As the days passed, Jack began taking out supply lines, weapon drops, cash runs, drug labs. Each hit was clean, efficient, and loud enough to send a message. He wasn't hiding, he was hunting. But it didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Jack returned to his safe house, he spotted a familiar figure leaning against the gate. Long dreadlocks, leather jacket, and eyes sharp as razors. "Didn't think you'd call me in," said Maya Stone, former Delta Force, now freelance. "You must be desperate." Jack nodded. "I need someone I can trust, and someone who still knows how to shoot." She smiled. "Let's burn their little empire down together." They began coordinating raids with surgical precision. Every move Marcus made, Jack was a step ahead. But with each victory, Jack felt the tension rise. Marcus wasn't retreating. He was baiting. And then, it happened. Maya was captured during a recon mission gone wrong. Jack received a photo, her tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Along with it, a message carved into wood. Kandahar was just practice. Jack's heart pounded. This wasn't just a war. This was unfinished business. Marcus was forcing him to relive the worst mistake of his life. He suited up, grabbed the notebook, slid a photo of his squad into his vest. He wasn't just going to rescue Maya. He was going to finish what started in the desert. The city never truly slept. But for Jack Murdoch, this night felt like the last stand. Every echo of footsteps on the cracked pavement, every distant siren, was a reminder of the stakes. Maya's photo burned in his mind, the bruises on her face, the defiance in her eyes, despite captivity. He swore silently that he would not fail her. Not again. Jack moved like a ghost through the narrow alleys of the Bronx, his senses sharpened by years of warfare and survival. The abandoned fire station, now fortified and wired, was behind him. Ahead lay the fortified warehouse Marcus Wynn used as his base of operations, the heart of the private army. Jack had spent months dismantling piece by piece. Tonight was the reckoning. The plan was simple but risky. Jack's inside man, a young hacker he'd reluctantly recruited, had found the blueprints and security routines. Marcus had set traps, cameras, armed guards in shifts, and escape routes carved through the labyrinth of shipping containers outside the building. Jack slipped through the shadows, his tactical gear blending with the night. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. The cold wind bit at his skin, but he felt nothing but determination. His cum crackled softly. Maya's voice, distorted but clear. "Jack, if you get this, be careful." Jack grunted softly. In reply, "I'm coming, hold on." He dropped into position behind a rusted container just as a pair of guards passed by. Silently he dispatched them with precise strikes, one chokehold, one clean hit to the temple. No noise, no mercy. No mercy. Moving deeper, Jack avoided the cameras, disabling them with quick flicks of his wrist. This was a battlefield, not the streets he once walked freely. He felt the weight of years and loss, but the fire inside him burned hotter than ever. Suddenly a dog barked. An alarm bell rang somewhere deep inside the warehouse. No time to hesitate. Jack surged forward, slipping through the chaos as guards scrambled to respond. He took down one with a stun grenade, another with a suppressed pistol shot. His mind was a steel trap of focus. This was no longer about old wars. This was now inside the warehouse. Crates stacked to the ceiling hid the horrors Marcus was brewing. Jack found cages holding terrified young men, women, evidence of forced recruitment, drugs, weapons, a dark empire fueled by pain and fear. But Maya wasn't among them. A voice boomed from the shadows. Well, if it isn't Murdoch." Marcus stepped into the dim light, a cold smile cutting across his weathered face. "You've been a ghost for too long, Jack. I wondered if you'd show." Jack leveled his pistol. "Let her go, Marcus. This ends tonight." Marcus laughed, a cruel sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You don't get to tell me how this ends. You left us to die in Kandahar. I'm taking back what's mine." Suddenly, from behind Marcus, shadows moved. Dozens of armed men emerged, mercenaries, gangsters, and ex-soldiers, all loyal to Marcus's cause. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't take them all head on. Not here. Not now. But Jack had one advantage: experience. With a roar, he kicked a barrel, causing a chain reaction of crates and sparks. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted. Jack moved like lightning, weaving through the onslaught, using every ounce of skill to survive. He took cover behind a crate, exchanging shots with a mercenary who seemed to anticipate his every move. Jack's fingers tightened on the trigger, the recoil familiar, comforting. Suddenly, a bullet grazed his arm. Pain seared through him, but he pushed on. He saw Maya, bound but defiant, on a raised platform. Her eyes met his, a spark of hope igniting. Jack charged, blasting guards in his path, his tactical training overriding years of wariness. He reached Maya, cutting her bonds with a hunting knife he'd carried since his deployment. "Jack," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "No time," he said, hoisting her to her feet. They moved toward the exit as the firefight intensified. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Outside, the city felt surreal, sirens wailing, distant shouts, the first light of dawn brushing the horizon. Jack and Maya slipped into the shadows, battered but alive. They knew the war wasn't over, but Jack had won this battle. In the days that followed, Marcus Wynn's network unraveled. Police raids, thanks to evidence Jack and Maya collected, dismantled the private army. Marcus disappeared. Most believed he fled the country, but Jack knew better. Some ghosts never truly vanish. Jack returned to his quiet apartment in New York, the city buzzing around him like an unrelenting storm. Maya stayed by his side, their bond forged in fire and danger. Jack often stared out at the skyline, thinking of his squad, the men who never made it back. He had survived wars overseas, battles on the streets, and the ghosts that haunted him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a guardian. And in this city of endless nights, he vowed to protect it with everything he had left.